This World News program coming to you live from Algiers with Madame Zian. To the headlines. That's in dozens injured in attacks by the SDF targeting civilians in the city of Aleppo. The Syrian army says it has begun carrying out strikes against the group's positions in the city as humanitarian bodies record tens of thousands displaced by the fighting. Also coming up, Zionist airstrikes killed 9 target Gaza schools, humanitarian aid delayed by fuel shortages, a foreign journalist barred for the 3rd year. Next, the Lebanese army announces it has achieved the objectives of the first phase of its plan to confine weapons to state authority. President Joseph Aoun reaffirms full support for the army's efforts to entrench the plan, while Israeli air raids on southern Lebanon leave 1 person dead and others wounded. And Russia condemned U.S. seizure of Russian oil tanker, warned of international law violations and escalating global tensions. The details of your nightly news. First, the operations command of the Syrian Arab Army announced early this morning the launch of focused targeting operations against positions of the so-called Syrian Democratic Forces, SDF, in the neighborhoods of Sheikh Maqsoud, الإشهارية, and Beni Zayed in the city of Aleppo, urging civilians to stay away from the forces' locations. The Syrian Arab News Agency reported that the command announced a curfew in these neighborhoods starting at 1:30 p.m. until further notice, warning the forces against targeting civilians wishing to leave through the corridors announced by Aleppo Governorate. Sana, citing Aleppo Health Media Director Munir al-Muhammad, reported that the number of civilian casualties resulting from what he described as SDF shelling of the city's neighborhoods has risen to 9 killed and 55 injured. The agency added that the group is shelling Sheikh Taha neighborhood with artillery and targeting the Leiramoun area and the Shihan roundabout with heavy machine guns. In a related development, Syrian media reported the fall of shells in the vicinity of a Sharafiyya neighborhood in Aleppo. Sana reported that Syrian civil defense resumed evacuations Thursday in Aleppo neighborhoods amid continued SDF shelling. Teams are helping civilians from Sheikh Maqsoud, Sharafiyya, and Beni Zayed via Al-Warid and the Zuhur crossings, providing first aid to the elderly and sick. Humanitarian corridors were reopened until 1 p.m. in coordination with the Syrian army. Tensions and clashes have flared again between the Syrian government and the so-called Syrian Democratic Forces after the March 10th agreement deadline passed. Under this agreement, the SDF was supposed to integrate its forces into the Syrian army. However, the SDF is being accused of delaying the implementation of the deal. More details with Usama Ayed.
Amidst mutual accusations, tensions have resurfaced in northeastern Syria, specifically in the city of Aleppo, which has become the scene of what has been described as the most violent confrontations between the Syrian government forces and the Syrian Democratic Forces. Damascus accuses the SDF of delaying the implementation of the March 10th agreement of last year, which stipulates that both parties must implement its provisions by the end of 2025. The agreement stipulated most notably the affirmation of the Syrian territorial integrity and the rejection of any partition or cessationist projects, the integration of the SDF into the Syrian military institutions under the supervision of the Ministry of Defense, and the integration of civilian institutions affiliated with the autonomous administration into the structure of the Syrian state. The 9-month deadline for implementing the agreement's provisions, agreed upon by all parties, has passed, leaving tension and escalation looming over the capital of northern Syria. The repercussions of what is happening in Aleppo are not limited to Syria. Regional powers believe that the events of northern Syria will have repercussions for neighboring countries, including Turkey, which reached an agreement with Abdullah Öcalan on February 27, 2025. Öcalan issued a historic appeal calling for the dissolution of the Kurdistan Workers' Party (PKK) in a message titled "A Call for Peace and a Democratic Society." Amid accusations, mutual procrastination and lack of dialogue, and with the expiration of the period set by the parties to the March 10 agreement between the Syrian government and the so-called SDF, armed confrontations have returned, this time from northern Syria, amid fears of other hotspots of tension igniting against the Syrian government, recalling what was witnessed in the Latakia governorate on the Syrian coast and what Suwaida in the south experienced in terms of confrontations which were exploited by the Zionist occupation forces that continue their aggression and incursions in southern Syria.
The European Union expressed deep concern over the situation in the Syrian city of Aleppo due to the ongoing clashes between the Syrian Arab Army and the so-called SDF, calling for restraint and the protection of civilians. EU spokesperson Anwar al-Lanouni urged all parties to exercise restraint, protect civilians and seek a peaceful and diplomatic solution. This comes on the eve of a scheduled visit to Damascus by European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and European Council President Antonio Costa, who are set to hold talks with the Syrian leadership. For its part, the United Nations called on all parties in Syria to immediately de-escalate tensions and exercise the utmost restraint, stressing the need to comply with international law in protecting civilians and civilian infrastructure. UN Secretary-General spokesperson Stéphane Dujarric expressed concern over reports of civilian deaths and injuries following clashes in Aleppo, northern Syria, noting that the UN continues to encourage all parties to show flexibility and good faith, both militarily and politically, and to urgently resume negotiations. Now we move on to news in occupied Palestine. Several Palestinians were killed and others injured as a result of intense Zionist airstrikes across the Gaza Strip since dawn Thursday. According to the Gaza Ministry of Health, 9 Palestinians were killed, including 7 who died when a Zionist suicide drone struck a displacement tent on Street 5 in Al-Mawasi area of Khan Yunis in southern Gaza. Additional casualties occurred in northern Gaza, where the Zionist occupation targeted Abu Hussein School in Jabalia, a shelter for displaced families, killing several, mostly children, and injuring others, according to medical sources. And a Palestinian girl was killed and another person injured by gunfire from Zionist occupation forces Thursday morning in the Gaza Strip. An ambulance and emergency services reported that military vehicles opened fire in Al Fallujah area west of the Jabalia camp, killing an 11-year-old girl, while another child was wounded in Al Zaytun, Gaza City. 4 Palestinians were killed, 1 newly recorded and 3 recovered from the rubble, while 7 others were injured over the past 48 hours. And that is according to daily statistical report on casualties, resulting from the Zionist aggression on the Gaza Strip. The Gaza Ministry of Health stated that since the ceasefire on October 11, the total number of martyrs has reached 425, with 1,206 injured. The statement added that the cumulative toll since the beginning of the aggression on October 7, 2023 has risen to 71,395 martyrs and 171,287 injured. The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, warned that fuel shortages and road closures are significantly slowing and obstructing the humanitarian response in the Gaza Strip. In a statement issued Wednesday, OCHA said that despite the resumption of fuel shipments, occupation restrictions on entry remain in place amid congestion, storage gaps, rising costs, and delays in aid delivery.
The shortage of fuel and road closures significantly slowed the humanitarian response during December. Although fuel supply operations have resumed, ongoing access restrictions, congestion, and limited storage continue to drive up costs and delay aid delivery. Repeated fuel shortages forced a number of hospitals and health facilities in the Gaza Strip to reduce services or cease operations entirely, posing a direct threat to the lives of patients and the wounded.
The Palestinian Journalists Syndicate condemned the continued prevention by the Zionist entity's occupation forces of foreign journalists from entering the Gaza Strip for the third consecutive year. In a statement issued Thursday, the syndicate said this decision is part of a systematic policy aimed at isolating Gaza from the world and obscuring the truth about the genocidal war and ethnic cleansing being carried out by the occupation, and one of the gravest contemporary crimes against press freedom. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez announced Thursday his readiness to send personnel as part of peacekeeping forces to the Gaza Strip when the opportunity arises. Speaking at a New Year reception in Madrid for Spanish ambassadors, Sánchez said he would propose to the parliament the deployment of peacekeeping forces in Palestine once a framework for moving forward with de-escalation efforts is determined. He stressed that Spain will not forget Gaza and affirmed that the establishment of an independent, viable, and secure Palestinian state is the best solution for achieving stability, development, and progress in the region. In Lebanon, the Lebanese army announced that its weapons restrictions plan has entered an advanced stage after successfully achieving the first phase's objectives. The army said this phase focused on expanding operational presence, securing key areas, and establishing control over territories in the south of the Litani River. It added that ongoing Zionist attacks and the occupation of several sites continue to limit access and hinder mission progress. Lebanese President Joseph Aoun reaffirmed full support for the army's role in asserting state authority and sovereignty, especially south of the Litani River, emphasizing that arms belong exclusively to the state and that Lebanon's territory must not be used for hostile acts, protecting national interests and citizens. Still in Lebanon, a citizen was killed in an airstrike that targeted a vehicle on the Zaita Binaful road in the south of the country. The Lebanese National News Agency reported on Thursday that hostile drones continue to fly at very low altitude over the vicinity of the targeted area. Earlier, the occupation forces of the Zionist entity announced that they had targeted a member of Hezbollah in the same area without providing further details. The coalition in Yemen announced that the head of the so-called Southern Transitional Council, Idrous Esbeidi, traveled to Somaliland by boat before boarding a plane bound for the Somali capital, Mogadishu. In a statement issued on Thursday, the coalition said the aircraft transported him under the supervision of the Emirati officers to Mogadishu and waited for about an hour before departing to a military airport in Abu Dhabi without clarifying whether Esbeidi was still on board. In other news, Russia's Ministry of Defense announced on Thursday that its air defense systems intercepted and destroyed dozens of Ukrainian drones overnight. In a statement, the ministry said Russian air defense systems shot down 66 Ukrainian drones across several regions at around midnight Moscow time. And Russian strikes late Wednesday caused near-total blackouts in Ukraine, Dnipro's Petrovsk and Zaporizhzhia regions, with critical facilities running on backup power. Emergency teams are working to restore electricity, water, and heating amid harsh weather conditions. And the Ukrainian minister announced on Thursday that more than 1 million households in the central of Dnipropetrovsk region have been left without water and electricity following overnight Russian strikes targeting energy infrastructure. Deputy Prime Minister for Ukraine's reconstruction, Oleksiy Kuleba, said repair work is ongoing to restore heating and water supplies to more than 1 million subscribers. Meanwhile, Acting Energy Minister Artem Nekrasov stated that around 800,000 people remain without electricity in the region.
Вночі ворог завдав чергового удара по українській енергетиці.
At night, the enemy once again struck the Ukrainian energy sector. As a result of the attack, the Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhzhia regions are almost completely without electricity. Energy workers began restoration work at night. As of this morning, about 800,000 consumers in the Dnipropetrovsk region are still without electricity.
Часткове заживлення.
And Russia announced on Thursday that it has taken control of another village in Ukraine's Dnipropetrovsk region, where its forces have been advancing since summer. Russia's Ministry of Defense said its troops captured the village of Bratsky, south of Dnipropetrovsk, while Kiev confirmed that overnight attacks occurred in the area. And President Volodymyr Zelensky said a draft plan outlining U.S. security guarantees for Ukraine is now virtually ready to be presented to U.S. President Donald Trump for approval. In a post on X on Thursday, Zelensky said the bilateral document on security guarantees is essentially complete and ready for finalization at the highest level with the U.S. President. Russia said on Thursday it would consider any Western presence in Ukraine a legitimate target for its armed forces following European announcements of plans to deploy thousands of troops after the war. Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said in a statement that all such units and facilities would be regarded as legitimate military targets, adding that these warnings have been repeatedly issued at the highest levels and remain in effect. According to Reuters, citing a notice from Lloyd's List Intelligence and a separate maritime security source that an oil tanker en route to Russia was attacked by drones in the Black Sea on Wednesday, prompting it to request assistance from the Turkish Coast Guard and change course. The sources said the Elbus flying the Palo flag was targeted by a small unmanned boat and a drone that struck the engine room. No injuries were reported among the 25 crew members, and no pollution was recorded. The U.S. Senate voted a resolution barring President Donald Trump from taking any further military action in Venezuela. According to media reports, Congress approved the resolution by 52 votes to 47, a move that would prevent President Trump from carrying out any additional military action in Venezuela without congressional authorization.
No one has ever regretted.
And Venezuelan Interior Minister Diosdado Cabello announced on Thursday that a U.S. attack on the capital Caracas, during which the United States arrested President Nicolas Maduro, resulted in the death of 100 people. Media outlets quoted Cabello as saying that 100 people, including civilians, were killed with a similar number wounded. He described the attack on his country as horrific.
Venezuela was the victim of a crafty, barbarian attack where up until now, and I say up until now, you have 100 dead people, 100, and a similar number of injured people. A terrible attack against our country. This is true. That's the truth, and no one will hide it. There is no way this can be hidden. Today, the world is openly discovering this.
Eso es cierto, eso es una verdad.
And China's foreign ministry said on Thursday that U.S. actions to detain foreign vessels in international waters constitute a serious violation of international law. Foreign ministry spokeswoman Mao Ning stressed at a press conference that China consistently opposes what it described as illegal unilateral sanctions imposed without a basis in international law and without authorization from the United Nations Security Council. And Russia accused the United States of fuel intentions and threatening international maritime navigation following Washington's seizure of an oil tanker flying the Russian flag in the northern Atlantic Ocean on Wednesday. Russia's foreign ministry said on Thursday that the U.S. move would only lead to further military and political escalation between the two countries, expressing deep concern over what it described as Washington's readiness to trigger international crises that threaten global stability. And more details on the seized tanker with Hussam Barkan, journalist at Al24 News. He's here with us in the studio. Thank you for joining us, Hussam.
Thank you, Maria.
So we have seen the condemnation of Russia and of China. We have just seen them on television. What is this tanker seizure about? Can you explain what happened? Why is it important? Why is it all over the news?
Yeah, thanks so much, Mariam. So, Maria, before we start, we should understand that actually there were two tankers that have been seized in the recent months. And the first one was called Sofia, and the second one is Marinera. So for Sofia, it was seized near the Caribbean Sea, where the United States currently is imposing a blockade near Venezuela. But for the second one is Marinera, and here where things get really strange, because for Sofia, of course, it was in the Caribbean Sea, but for Marinera, it was 200 miles from in the North Atlantic, like 200 miles from the shores of the United States. This is why it's all over the news. Like, why would the United States go 200 exactly to seize a tanker? And of course, from the perspective of the United States, saying that it seized it because it's part of what it is called the shadow fleet. It is calling it the shadow fleet. So what is exactly the shadow fleet, according to the US, is a network of tankers, the United States seeing almost 1,000 tankers that are transporting oil illegally, according to the United States. And why they're doing this? Because they're Iran, Russia, and Venezuela that are under sanctions. And these sanctions are making it really, really hard for them to sell their oil. This is why they came up with this idea of a shadow fleet where they can sell their oil in a very illegal way. So
to escape from the sanctions.
Exactly. And in order to put things in perspective, you might ask where these sanctions are coming from. You know, that since the conflict started between Russia and Ukraine, Russia has been subjected to thousands of sanctions from the EU, from Canada, from the United States. And these sanctions, this is just a way from Russia to escape those sanctions. And this is why the United States is saying that this is a way to enforce these sanctions, even though it's 200 miles from the shores of the United States.
It's also worth noting that the UK also helped in this operation. It helped the US in seizing the Russian-flagged tanker. Exactly.
And actually, Miriam, this is a very interesting information as of why the United Kingdom is helping the United States here, even though Russia is saying this is very illegal. The United States is saying it's enforcing sanctions. But there is a very important information that we need to share here, Miriam, which is that there is a very important maritime route there, which is called the Greenland-Iceland UK gap. You got it? And it's a choke point, very, very strategic. We could see here that the UK is part of it. And this is why the UK was participating in sharing, helping and supporting the US in sharing, data and information about this tanker. And there's one information that I wanted to conclude with, Mariam, which is very, very important, which is the behavior of the United States starting from 2026. It's starting to impose its will on the Western Hemisphere. And we know that the new strategy of national security of the United States is saying that, it's part of the Monroe Doctrine. It is imposing its its influence on the Western Hemisphere. But we could see that Trump is going even further. It's not only the Western Hemisphere, we have America Latina and we have Canada, but Trump is saying even Greenland is part of the Western Hemisphere. And since this tanker was there, we should impose our law there.
Thank you very much for your insights, Hussam. And now we move on to the rest of our news. Algeria, along with 21 countries, and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation strongly condemned the recent illegal visit by an Israeli official to the Somaliland region of the Federal Republic of Somalia. In a joint statement to the 22 countries and the OIC said the visit constitutes a clear violation of Somalia's sovereignty, unity and territorial integrity, undermining established international norms and the United Nations Charter. They stress that respect for international law, non-interference in internal affairs, and adherence to diplomatic norms are essential for regional and international stability.
The foreign ministers of Algeria and 21 other countries, in addition to the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, recalling the previous statement issued on December 27, 2025 by the foreign ministers, which rejected Israel's recognition of the Somaliland region of the Federal Republic of Somalia, expressed their strong condemnation of the recent illegal visit by an Israeli official to the Somaliland region of the Federal Republic of Somalia on January 6, 2026, and affirmed that this visit constitutes a clear violation of the sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity of the Federal Republic of Somalia and undermines established international norms and the Charter of the United Nations.
And on Thursday, Algerian President Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces and Minister of National Defense, chaired a meeting of the High Security Council, according to a statement by the Algerian presidency. The statement said the meeting reviewed the 2025 assessment and outlook for 2026 regarding national defense, the security situation along Algeria's borders with neighboring countries, and the overall internal security situation. That brings us to the end of our program for tonight. Thanks for your kind attention and have a great night.